name is Father Moses Berry, and I live in the house that my great-grandparents built in 1875. My great-grandfather built this house and his wife, Marie Caroline Boone Berry. They built this house. My grandfather was born and raised in this house. My father was born and raised in this house. I was born and raised in this house. I spent most of my young childhood in this house being raised by my grandmother, who was the daughter of a slave. Her father was Wallace White, the first black man in the Missouri State Cavalry. They fought at Vicksburg.
Nathan Boone was the son of Daniel Boone, an American pioneer and frontiersman. Nathan Boone lived in Ash Grove most of his life. The home of Nathan Boone still sits in its original place. His home, as well as his land, is now a state park. He would end up having an affair with one of his slaves. This slave was Father Moses's great-great-great-grandmother.
Caroline was Nathan Boone's daughter, Daniel Boone's granddaughter, and my great-great-grandmother. I'm a priest in the Orthodox Church in America. When you're ordained in the Orthodox Church, you have another name. I'm named after one saint called Saint Moses the Ethiopian. Some people refer to him as Saint Moses the Black. He was a 3rd century desert father. And they had this whole group of people called desert fathers and mothers. And they went away into the desert for seclusion, to be away from society. And sometimes they lived as hermits, and sometimes they lived in small communities called skeets, and which is a name after a certain region of the desert. So that's how I came to have that name, because I chose that name thinking that it was quite a lofty name. And the person who baptized me was an old Russian monk, and he asked me what name I wanted, and I said, St. Moses. And he starts laughing. He said, "You're nothing like St. Moses. You're verbose." And St. Moses is a very humble man. I've been a priest since 1988. I've been a religious cleric in a non-denominational church since 1977. I turned 21 in the Missouri State Penitentiary in a 4.5-foot cell by 6.5 with 12-foot ceiling and no windows. And there was a horrible place, and especially, since it was very different than today's prisons. Today's prisons they have, nice food, and I don't know if it's nice, but they have food and televisions and all this. It was not that way at that time. I thought, this was a wake-up call for me, but of course I went back doing the same thing. And then I moved to Hawaii. And after I got Hawaii, I decided that maybe I really better get serious about this whole thing. We have a museum it was in Ash Grove here, and we ran that until I became ill. I got sick. And, but we still have the museum online. And it's called Ozarks Afro-American Heritage Museum. So when I became ill, I thought, my goodness, we can no longer keep this open because it's such a delicate subject, this whole matter of slavery, that I couldn't trust it to anyone to tell the story. Because if you tell that story wrong, it's a very sad commentary about race in this country.
Some of the more fragile items were left at Father Moses' house, such as a telling quilt,
in the South to freedom in the North,
and neck shackle and chains.
A person's neck like this, and closes there, and then this is a padlock that goes here called a screw lock, and then this would go through that and connect those two parts of the shackle. This is called a walking ball and chain. this goes through that hoop, and that's how the slaves would be transported from one place to another. They were mean instruments that held the slave captive, but it was also a means by which my ancestors' souls could soar, because they were no longer citizens of this world. They were only citizens of the world to come.
On April 14th, 1906, 3 black men named Horace B. Duncan, Fred Coker, and Will Allen were lynched on the Springfield Square. They were not given a trial. The lynchings were a result of a woman claiming they had raped her. The men were lynched and burned, leaving only piles of ash by morning. Citizens quickly searched through the ash to find souvenirs to take with them. Souvenirs, such as minted coins and postcards with the bodies painted on them, were sold. The woman would later admit she was lying.
As a result of that lynching, there was a mass exodus of people from Springfield and Greene County and surrounding counties, because there was these people, it was a mass hysteria that took place. And the lynch mobs, of course, they hung these 3 guys from the arm of a mock statue of the Statue of Liberty on the public square. Many of those people just left. They left their properties. And my family was one of the few that stayed. I mean, probably the only ones who stayed, because we had so much camaraderie with the local white population that they were our defenders. We still have the cemetery. It's called the Berry Cemetery. It's on the National Historic Sites Registration, a monument. It was a 47-ton piece of solid marble, which is polished on the front. All the names of the people who are buried there without a tombstone, and there are many people who are slaves. The cemetery is dedicated to slaves, Indians, and paupers. We have 3 Osage Indian mounds there, and from Chief Joseph Two Bears of the Osage Nation, his relatives are buried there. It was against the law for black people to be buried, as well as Native Americans to be buried in white cemetery. And also people who were paupers, who couldn't afford a plot, who were white. So they didn't have any place either. So they sort of entered into the same category of the downtrodden. There's an old Irish ballad that says, it's called Mary and Her Gallant Soldier. And it's about this really wealthy, it's from the 1800s, this wealthy woman who falls in love with a soldier. And she doesn't, he doesn't want her to go with him into battle, because at that time, the wives used to follow the battalions, and she didn't want her to do that because it's too dangerous. And she says to him, "And when we're in a foreign land, I'll guard you, darling, with my right hand, in hopes that God would send a friend to Mary and her gallant soldier." This is what happens when you get to know individuals. When you know groups of people, it's always a mess. That's all you know, because you can't get to know or have any kind of relationship with a group. You can have a relationship with individuals. So once you have relationships with an individual, which is one of the things that's lacking, I believe, in our present culture, is that we don't have individual relationships. We don't invite people over to our house who may be different than we are. So I'm hoping that your generation can capture again is this idea of trying to be good to each other, trying to be kind to one another, trying to take up for the underdog. Tell me about myself. It's a pretty big question there.